All right, let's go ahead and get started. We are at 12:02. Jorge, you're there and you can hear me?
Yes, I am.
All right, so hello everyone. This is Alfredo Abate, your current Chicago Oracle User Group's president. And welcome to today's webinar. As an attendee, you'll be in listen-only mode and you can ask questions in the chat window, which we'll monitor. We'll try to answer as many of the questions as we can at the end of the presentation. We'll also be streaming live on our YouTube channel, and the recording will be available to view at any time later. It's really great to be here with you today virtually. The group hasn't met in person in a very long time, as those who are regulars know. And for those that are new to the Chicago Oracle Users Group, we welcome you. Traditionally, our group meets between 4 to 6 times per year in various locations around the Chicagoland suburbs for presentations, as well as hands-on workshops by Oracle experts, ACEs, and authors. Unfortunately, with the restrictions in place due to COVID, we didn't know if we'd be able to meet in person this year. So taking some cues from some of the other user groups, we decided to go virtual. Today is our second webinar in a series of 20 we'll be holding for the next 20 weeks. We've got our schedule completed and we'll be wrapping up the registration portion very soon. So be sure to keep an eye on our website so you can register for those sessions as well. And our website is COUG.us. You can see it there on the little banner that we have displayed. COUG.us, and it will get you to the page which has all of the upcoming presentations. Another thing I'd like to point out is that our user group runs completely unfunded. Our members don't pay any dues, and our meetings have always been free for as long as I've been running the group now for about 6 years. So I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, OApsNet Partners. Without them, we wouldn't be able to be doing these weekly webinars. They'd allow us to use their Zoom platform. They are an Oracle Gold partner and systems integrator with specialties in areas of financial business solutions based on Oracle applications, both on-premises and in the cloud. And they also provide services in the areas of AP automation, Apex development, database upgrades, and administration. Next week, we will have Jeff Smith, who will be doing a really fantastic talk on REST APIs for Oracle with ORDS, or Oracle REST Data Services, which if you're here for Apex, I would highly recommend that you'd sign up for Jeff's talk, because these things really can go hand in hand, really leverage some really neat features that can be used. So today, we had the pleasure of having Jorge Rimblas, who is an Apex technical lead at DRW, Oracle ACE, and he's been an Oracle database professional since 1995. Jorge, welcome. I'm going to give you control of the screen.
Thank you, Alfredo. Very happy to be here. This is a presentation I'm very, very happy to share with everybody because it applies to all versions of Apex. So, and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to take advantage of it immediately. All right. I'm going to assume you're seeing my screen now and you can see the first slide. Of course, you can do that with Apex report templates, the definitive guide. And I know it sounds a little presumptuous to call this the definitive guide, but I thought it was a good title to get you to attend. We are going to cover a lot about reports. And as I mentioned, you'll be able to use this almost immediately. You can find me on Twitter at Rimblas. As Alfredo gave a quick intro, thank you for that. I'm not going to go more into that except for to say that you can find me also on rimblas.com/blog or just rimblas.com, my last name. And at the end of the session, also, I'm going to tweet out a link to this session and a lot of other material that complements this presentation. I would like to make you comfortable enhancing your report layouts. That is my main goal for this session. If I can do that, then I feel I've been successful, and hopefully you can apply some of these things immediately. Our agenda will be covering what are some design patterns for presenting data, talk about classic reports, and the star of the presentation really is the custom name templates, how those work and how powerful they are. We'll cover a little bit of interactive reports and interactive grids, and then something I like to call the single line alert messages. Let's talk about a pattern for presenting data. Of course, we can present data as tables. And if we're looking at an Apex report, or really a lot of reports on the web, you will have an HTML tag that is your table tag. Then the TR is for your table row, your TD is for your cell, your table data. And then in Apex, we're going to have some value that comes from our query that gets injected into our column value. And all these other things, this hash substitution strings are related to the alignment would be, does it align to the start, the middle, or the end? And then the name of the column will go here when it's a static report. But you get the idea on this pattern. And if I'm inspecting a report, we can see that a single row has this pattern on all of them. And I can see the name of the columns as well. And I can see here this align center, align right, that refers to that substitution string. So any report will kind of look like that. Now, what am I doing here? Let me just show you real quick that element. So if I'm looking at this report, I can right click and select inspect. And if I inspect, I get an inspector in the bottom. And this inspector, when I hover over the elements, you can see how the cells get highlighted. So that's what I'm doing here. And if I highlight the TR, that's the whole row. And if I highlight another one, you can see them how they get highlighted, right? Now, that's just to set the mood. But we could also present data as a list. That is a super common pattern. And let's say I have something like a to-do list. And if I inspect this to-do list element, I'm going to see now that I have this UL for an unordered list that selects the whole list. And each list element is an LI element. And if I expand it, I can see what's in my list, which could be very complicated content, okay? Right now I'm showing simple text and an icon to specify if it's completed or not. But inside this LI, this content can be very complicated. Instead of calling it complicated, let's call it advanced, or it can present a lot of data. So here's my structure of the list, and we can start making some abstractions out of this. First, whenever we have an LI element, there's going to be some content inside of it. Now, we're going to repeat this LI element multiple times as we select from a table, right? This is a part that repeats. But so we're going to call that for each row. For each row, we're going to have some content. But also, we're going to have something that's going to be before and after our rows. In this case, it's a list. It's very simple to identify. We have the UL, the unordered list tag. That's what happens before rows and what happens after rows. That is the terminology that Apex is going to use when we start looking at templates. Look at let's backtrack a little, just look at some simple examples where we're going. So in classic reports, we could modify the template and make it so that based on a column, I'm going to do some highlighting or some changing of data. That is not that exciting, but it is very common use case. Now, this is also an example of a classic report that I did a long time ago. And you can see here how it has this totally different pattern where there's a grouping, if you will, of tasks that get done for each of these stages. So new is a stage. When something's new, we're going to send a letter. This second letter didn't apply. We're going to do a claim request from client, and we can do check boxes to indicate that it's been done. And then it'll be another stage and so on. And the X's will say it doesn't apply. So if it doesn't apply, it would gray out. And if I click on it, it would specify who clicked on it and when. you can see this starts becoming really interesting. And I don't know if you noticed, there's a edit button here. So there's also even more possible complexity that we can add. This is a simple select statement and a single classic report. This is another classic report, and we're going to cover this in this presentation. In this case, I'm presenting contacts. Let's imagine that we have a vendor, and these are contacts that belong to that vendor. And we can have the name, their title, an indicator if they're active or not, and multiple ways to reach them, a phone, an email, and so on. This is also one classic report, and we're going to cover that. This is even more interesting. This is also a classic report. Everything after the word men's, we can see this. This is fictitious data for running shoes, but this was a real, this became a real template where we specified the brand and the type of shoe, and then the actual shoes with indicators that tell us if it's out of stock, the part number, the price, add to cart, and so on. Again, you wouldn't imagine this is a classic report, but it is. So if I got you a little bit interested in that, let's look at, there's two types of classic reports: generic columns, which is the one we use all the time. Okay. Every time you've created a classic report, if you haven't made any changes to the template, you have been using the generic columns template. But today I'm going to try to introduce you to name column templates. And these are templates where we specify the whole row, how is that row going to be presented? And that's how those previous examples were created. The generic columns, every column in the SQL is going to be treated the same way. Basically, the value that we get from a SQL statement will get injected into that substitution string that is a column value. We saw this at the beginning, right? There's more stuff going on, like those are attributes from Apex, the alignment, and we're going to get the name of the column in the column header. And we saw this. And then with conditions, we can go from this to steps where we highlight one of the rows. The way that's done is by switching the template. If I would go to edit the template, there's actually 4 column templates that we can specify within a report. Each one of those will have a condition. We can see the condition here. We can specify PL SQL expression, and then in that expression, we can place a lot of, well, anything that's a valid PL SQL, right? It can get really complicated. In the example we were looking at, if I go back to this, I'm going on the column that is product available. So if the condition being product available equal N, I'm going to do something different. If it's not available, I'm going to add something to my template. In this case, I'm going to add a class to highlight it. I'm not going to cover step by step of this. When I share this, you're going to be able to see that there's a fairly old blog post where I take you through all these simple steps of taking that report and creating your own. Let me just do a super quick demo of that. Here's the report. It's still a very simple query. We're using that product avail column to decide. And on the actual region, there's a template. Now, I'm showing this on Apex 20.1, but what I'm showing you right now goes all the way back to very, very old versions of Apex. I'm pretty sure this was available even before Apex 4.2. So here's a template for the region. So this is the region, but if you go here to attributes, there's a template also over here, and this is the template for the report. And I created one called product template. And by default, we start with standard. So all I did was go to share components, I went to the templates. I found my report template. I found standard right here, right? And this little button will create a copy. So I made a copy of that and they're identical. So I created a new one. I created this product template and it's identical to standard. But then what I did is find the template part and scroll down to the head. Those were the headers. And I created an entry here that says when the product available is N, I'm going to have a highlight class. I defined that in my application. Okay. Highlight in this case was the yellow color. So every TD element will have this yellow color class when the product available is N. And if it's not, this one has no condition, then I'm going to use the built-in template. And as I mentioned, you'll be able to see that step by step on that blog post. But I don't want to spend time on that because the star of this is the name column templates. They're called named columns because instead of having that column value and the substitution string, like I see over here, let me go back to that product template. Each one of our cells will have just this column value and it gets mapped from each of our columns. Instead of having this column value generic substitution string, every column will have a substitution string that matches the name of our columns. Now it's also possible, as opposed to the generic, right? It's also possible to name them by, reference them by position. 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't like this approach because I'm pretty sure that by the end of the day or tomorrow, I won't remember what position 2 meant, right? Or position 3 meant. But sometimes it's useful for generic queries because this means that I could switch this query completely and still use positions 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and so on. Getting back to the simple list example, let me show you the example first. The simple to-do list. So I have this to-do list, and this is a template that's creating this view. Basically, I have this content. I'm going to have my content is going to be to do and the font awesome indicator to tell me if it's checked or not checked. And basically, for those that are longtime Oracle people, you know the decode is going to be if it's null, completed will tell me if it's completed or not. So if completed by is null, I'm going to have nothing. Otherwise, I'm going to have a check to get added here. Why is that? If I inspect this, there's a font awesome that just has that word check in it. Let me make this a tiny bit bigger for you. So that's the one that's checked, but let me inspect the one that's not. It just says FA square. So all I'm doing is adding that word check here. And oops, if I spell it right, we'll see it. There you go. So now we can see the checkbox there. Where do we get those? Well, I like to go to apex.oracle.com/UT for universal theme. This is a sample app that you can install right from your productivity apps or sample apps from Apex. And I like to go here to icons. And if I search for check, I'm going to find all the check boxes, right? And all I did was find one of these, this checkbox. So here's where I found those names for my icons. And I'm just switching between the one that's FA check square O and FA square O. Yeah. So what else is interesting about this demo? If I edit that page, as I mentioned, the region is just a select statement and the template is still standard for the region. But if you go to the attributes, I created this template called simple list. version 1. Let's go to the simple list. This one is super simple. That's why it's called simple, right? Just an li element is going to take the column to do, and is going to take the column that has the word checked or empty, right? For my checked checkbox. That's all it is. And somewhere down here is going to have the ULs, the before rows. So before all my rows, I'm going to have a UL, and I'm adding this component CSS classes so that if a developer specifies other classes to the template, they will be injected here by Apex. And then after the rows, I'm going to close the UL. And that gives me this look and feel. The benefits of doing it like this is that you still just working with, once you create the template, you're still just working with your SQL statement. And you can have edit links and you can have dynamic actions that refresh and close the dialog. So what do I mean by that? I simply had this content become a link, and I can open it. I can say Jorge here. Now Brad, when I close, Brad, the report refreshes and it gets checked, right? And to do that edit, I only had to go to that column that is the to do and switch it to be a link. Very standard. I didn't have to do anything weird. It's still just a link that goes to my modal page, and I pass the ID so that the page loads. And then I have a dynamic action that when the dialog closes, I refresh my report. Now I have 2 refreshes because what I didn't show you is here's your standard classic report, and here's the other one, right? So in my page, I'm refreshing both of them so that I can get my data in sync. Okay. If there are questions, as Alfredo mentioned, put them on the chat, and we'll get to them shortly. Or Alfredo, I'm going to say if you see anything very pertinent to mention right now, I'm okay addressing it.
Okay. At the moment, there's nothing in the chat window.
Thank you. All right. So that's using that very simple definition. Now let's do name columns with some mixing of layouts. So how is this contact list created? There's actually 2 types of rows here. Now, before we do that, let me just show you. Let's go here to edit the row. Here's the report. For example, I can see here that Dwight is inactive. Let's make him active. By edit, all I got to do is switch the active to yes. I'm going to apply changes, and you're going to see how this record goes from being a little grayed out to being normal again. And the checkbox appears, and they're sorted by active first in alphabetical order. Okay, so then I can edit over here, and I can specify the personal information for the contact. Okay. So as I mentioned, there's 2 types of rows here. Some of you may already kind of identify that. We can abstract the rows that we have. One is the contact name and position itself. And the other one is how we're going to get a hold of them, right? The phones and emails. Those are 2 different types of rows. For one thing, this one has 2 cells, direct and the number. This one is a single cell where I have the edit and the name and other info, right? That's my 2 types of rows. Roughly speaking, this is a TD with a call span of 2. It's merging the 2 columns. There's going to be an edit link. There's going to be the name of the party. There's going to be the role and some icon. I'm just oversimplifying the icon here. Now, the other row is 2 cells within the table row, one for the type and another one for the entry. how do we take our data? If I were to select my parties, and this is for the sake of complexity, this is a view that is joining, right, with all the contacts and whatnot. So you can see here how I'm going to have for Dwight 3 rows because there's the main phone, the personal email, and the personal, the work email and personal email, if you will, right? Personal and main, whatever. So if I select a single ID, James had a single entry. Here's a challenge we have. When we have only one row, or when we display the first row, we got to display the name of the person and how to get a hold of them. So let me go back to this. What I mean is the very first, for every person, at least I'm going to have these 2 entries, right? When I select on my data, right? Now, the way to contact them may be empty. Let's not go into that. Let's just say that it's going to display empty, but we're still going to get that row with the name of the person. So for a single row, we need to use both types of templates. So how we're going to do this? Basically, every time I switch names, that row that I'm identifying, party ID 21, 141, I need to take one type of template. And for the others, I'm going to ignore the name and I'm going to display the type name and the entry. How do I get a hold of them? You see that? Now, we're just going to ignore that. How can we do that from a single query? Well, here's where we take a little tiny detour to talk about analytic functions. Longtime Oracle professionals may already know them very well and use them, but I'm going to introduce you to this analytic function. Row number basically allows me to enumerate my entries by a grouping, in this case, party ID. That's my partition, and order them by party name and entry name. So now I have this 1, 2, and 3. And then when I switch names, I start the numbering again in my RN row. Pretty cool, right? That's going to be my key now when I want to switch. Now, sometimes in some templates, I'm not going to use it on this one, but in some templates, we may want to use this count, the analytic version of count star. It basically, notice there's no group by. This is a valid select statement as is with this count here. It's going to tell me that there were 3 rows for this element, and there were 4 for this one and 1 for this other one. Why do you think sometimes I may want to use this count? Well, sometimes we may need to do something to our template on the very last row. So my conditions will be when RN is 1, I'm going to do something. I'm going to start my template. I'm going to display it one way. And sometimes when RN is equal to total rows, when my row number is equal to total rows, I'm going to do something different. So that's why sometimes this one will be very useful in the creation of this advanced templates. To learn a lot more about analytic functions, there's this YouTube series of videos from Connor McDonald. They're fantastic. These videos are 2 to 3 minutes long, and he covers one analytic function at a time with a very concise example. Fantastic for learning all sorts of different analytic functions. All right, so we have the row num added to our query, and now we can add that condition, RN equals 1. When RN is 1, I'm going to do one type of template. Otherwise, I'm going to do the other type of template. And the end result is this contact list. Hold on. Let me just edit this just to show you how that looks behind the scenes. Oh, What happened there? Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I got distracted here with where I'm going. I'm going right here. Here's the contacts. Here's the query. There's a lot more complexity to that query, right? I'm doing union with the emails and phones, but don't worry about that. Basically, I have my columns as I display the data. If I go to attributes, that's where my template is. I'm going to go to that template, and you can see how this whole part is just about out of a standard report, except for I'm doing things with a row status. If you remember, when they're not active, I kind of gray them out. So let's take Dwight. Oh.
Sorry, I'm having trouble understanding right now.
Well, my Alexa
Please
thinks
try
I was
again
talking to
later.
it. Sorry for that. So let's make him not active. And when I save this row, it's going to get grayed out. So that's controlled by having this active indicator be part of this row status. And then I have the call span with the 2 rows, the edit link, the name of the person, the role. You can see there's a lot more of HTML here. And here's the other type of template, the type of contact, direct, personal, and so on. And if it's a number or an email. And here's the condition, RN = 1. And for every other row, I'm taking this part of the template and reusing it here, plus that active, so it can be also grayed out. But that's all there is as the core of the template. Now, at this point, I should point something out. As most of you, if you're core Oracle developers or doing basic or core Apex work, you may not be experts on front end layout. So you may not be able to come up with a layout like this on your own with all of this HTML. But I don't expect you to use this. The way it works is somebody may give you a layout. Somebody may come up with a template. Someone may say, hey, look at this website or look at this page. I would like to present my data this way. And you can go and inspect it and grab those elements, grab that HTML and parameterize it. See, instead of taking this direct, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to parameterize this to be my substitution string with the type name, right? And the value and so on. So this is more about having the skill to recognize the pattern. And if you're given some HTML and CSS, you're able to take it and apply it to your Apex applications, and you can do that immediately. There's some limitations to this way of doing things. Of course, you need to have some HTML knowledge. You need to know what you're looking at and what that HTML does. The templates are not that reusable, right? This is a very dedicated template to presenting context. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If this is a core part of presenting my data and it's going to make my application stand out, I don't think there's anything wrong with creating a dedicated template. But hey, it's not really reusable for other things, right? It's just for presenting context. But I think that's fine. New columns, if you add new columns, will require to make template changes. So if we were to have another column here that says who is the manager for one of these people, we need to decide where does it go. I can add the column to the query, but if I add the column to the query, it's not going to be displayed here at all. In fact, I don't know if I have columns here that I'm not displaying. Let me just take a quick look at that. Well, for example, the ID is not visible. It is being used for linking, but it is a plain text column, but it's not visible, right? So that's what I mean by it's not part of the template. You're not gonna see it. So if you add new columns, you need to make template changes. And sadly, this has been true on all versions of Apex. There's only 4 template conditions, 4 elements to create our templates. And that I say sadly, because for very complicated layouts, that may not be enough. And then you may need to make it programmatic. You may need to code it by hand with HTTP calls and things like that. Potential pagination issues. Remember when I told you you could use that count analytic function to determine the end of a row, and maybe in your template at the end. So this is one row in my query, right? Maybe at the end I need to do something special. Well, if I don't get to the end of the row and I need to paginate, my HTML may be left open. So it's a potential issue. This template doesn't have that problem, but sometimes you may have that problem. And then you need to do more, we're going to call it gymnastics, data gymnastics, so that the rows that you present are sort of in sync with the pagination of your report so that you can close the HTML. So this only presents itself when you have very complicated layouts with maybe all 4 conditions are being used. And then you got to think about, when can my data close? When could my HTML move on to the next page without me closing my HTML tags? There is limited support for interactive reports. And with that, we're going to move on to talking about interactive reports. Unless there's actually, I'm not. I'm going to talk about it in a little bit. I'll show something about interactive reports in a bit. If there's any questions, go ahead and ping me right now. Otherwise, we'll move on to HTML expressions. HTML expressions exist in classic reports and interactive reports. That means there's a field where I can place all this HTML inside a single column. Basically, it's somebody, I wish I remember the name, cleverly called it no template layout. So let me show you this example. All right, so here's my classic report, okay? Book information, the book name, author, year, and a summary. Well, this HTML expression column or tab, this is also a classic report without a template. All I did was use the HTML expression. I used one of the columns, book name in this case, and I added the book name by author, summary, the copyright notice, and the year. All these are columns on my query, and I can place them all inside this HTML expression field. I love this, right? So now I really didn't create a template. If I go look at my attributes here, I'm still using the standard template from Apex. I just need to do some interesting setups. Let's talk about that. You place everything on the HTML expression. You do leave escape special characters turned on. So you do escape special characters. That means if any of this text had something that looked like a, how do you call it? JavaScript. If you have a JavaScript malicious code, it would still print like JavaScript because your text is being escaped. Let me show you that. That is an attribute that, depending on your version, you're going to see strip HTML. You can still do that. I'm going to go to the column. Here it is. Escape special characters is still turned on. I do want to escape special characters because the HTML, the valid HTML, is here on the cell itself. And if there was HTML inside the summary, that's going to be escaped, and it's not vulnerability is not a problem. The other thing I did with that report is I mentioned you don't need to strip HTML. You can keep it as is, but I did remove the headings. So if I go back to looking at this example, there's no, this is my heading column. I turned off the heading because what would my heading say? My heading would just have book name, which is the only column I'm displaying, right? So I do want to turn off headings. That's done here in attributes. Headings, none. And if I were to put it back, HTML expression, I have the book name there. And I have this author that was also being displayed. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and make it none. I'm going to make this author be hidden. It should have been hidden. I probably left it from a previous demo. So now we go back there and that's it. We have just the one cell and it looks like you have some sort of custom template. And you probably want to turn off download of the report, because what would download is this one column, but the one column really only has the book name. So you would get some interesting behavior there. Let's talk about something else called view detail. Just a recap, we saw that we have for each row, we have the before rows and after rows, right, in our template. Well, there's something in interactive reports where you have this column element called detail view, and you can turn it on. And if you turn it on, then you can have a layout that is totally different to your regular table layout. Did I do that here? I have an interactive report here. In this case, I use the same HTML expression on the interactive report, okay? But we could have used, if I go here to attributes, this detail view. When you turn on detail view, here's that familiar before rows for each row and after rows, which is what I was pointing out here, right? So if you specify that on an interactive report, you're going to get this view detail button to show and should show on, and then you can have any layout you want. This is from the sample database application. And this is an even more interesting example with interactive grid, which has something similar. This example is from the interactive grid cookbook. I'll have a link to that. This is created by John Snyder's, who is the creator of the maintainer of the interactive grid for the Apex component. And you can see here how he created this this way of displaying this list elements, one in a card layout where you have large, small, and medium, and how many you're showing. That is part of that detailed view. It's also available there. To find that example from John Snyder's, he's got a website called Hard Like Software, and he's got links to his cookbook, which actually this is the original one for Apex 5.1, but there's one for 19.1. Did he release a newer one? I'm trying to remember. Could be wrong, but a wealth of information here, not just about that. Lots of really good stuff. I highly recommend visiting his blog. Let's talk about something called single line alerts and messages. So here's an example. What if I told you this alert is a classic report? And this one, other example, this example was in a system where you specify time for entries to generate transactions for billing. So you would generate the time for entry, you would generate a project or mandate. And then this little section, it's a classic report. and then we have a button. So as you change these values, you would get here a query that would calculate how many entries and how many of those entries will create transactions. This element, let's talk about how it's put together. This is the building of that. Here's one sub-region. So generate transactions is one big region that has a sub-region for filtering. It has the elements that are going to be filtered. Then in front of that has the classic report I was telling you about. This classic report, as you can imagine, has the heading turned off, pagination turned off, and wonder if there's anything else that was needed to turn off, but basically it makes it be a single line. And then the button and the legend, of course, is down here, right? Pretty interesting, right? This is a very cool way where you can have a dynamic action that whenever you change the date or this, both of these fields make out the calculation of this. So you can have a very simple refresh dynamic action that refreshes this classic report and gives you information. Hopefully some of you are already getting ideas on how you can do that. So this display, it's using that HTML expression. I have two columns, the time entries and the Monday time entry total. It doesn't matter what we're calling it, right? But I have two columns in my query and I'm displaying them with whatever text I want to display right there. That 2 being bold is given by this B tags. We can reference in the HTML expression, as we saw, we can reference our columns with the column name notation is the name of the column. And remember, they're still scaped. You don't have a risk here of cross-site scripting. I did turn off the pagination on the attributes, so it doesn't tell me 1 of 1, right? And the headings are turned off. I don't want any headings, and that's it. I'm moving on to the next example. So this one is a little bit different. This one is not an HTML expression. This is another technique, if you will, how to do this. It turns out that is the heading of the column. So here I have a report that returns one single column. This is the heading. This is the value. And it's some warning. I'm running a query that's going to display some warning. I'm basically, in my heading, I have the full text to display. Now to do this one, I am changing the template to, there's this other template types. Let me show you what that is. Let's look at that example. In the single line alert. So here's my validation, my alert. The following users need verification. James Halbert. I'm gonna edit that page. Hello. Oh, I made a change and I didn't save. All right. I'm like, always those demos. You never know. Okay, here's the query. Of course, this is a very trivial query, but it could be a complicated validation. I have the full name. In the heading is where I'm saying the following users need verification. And on attributes, here's the template type. Instead of theme, I went with predefined. So if you had, this is a standard, right? Theme standard. And if I, let's see if I mess up my example, right? If I run this, I still have an alert, a region, but now my report gets displayed like what we would expect as a table. Well, it turns out that I can switch that predefined, and there's multiple things. I like the vertical one because it will show a column and value at the same level in front of each other. So then I get that column and value in front of each other. Now this is returning a single row. So if I were to change this, let's comment my where clause. It wouldn't quite give me the same effect, right? So in this case, if I had multiples, the way this is done is either because it's a single value, or maybe I would use a list aggregate to display a comma delimited list of values. And of course, you want to turn off pagination, right? So that you don't give a hint that that's a report. So let's do a quick recap. We've seen classic reports. We cover how this generic columns can have a condition, so we can change the highlighting or the look and feel of a single column. We started creating some more advanced template, although it's still fairly simple to follow. I didn't show version 2 of the to-do, but that's something that when I share this content, you'll be able to go download this app. It's on GitHub also. You'll be able to watch these videos that where I'm building this example. I'm building the example on one of the videos. I build this example from scratch, and then we take it to version 2 where it looks a little bit fancier. And now I can even drag and drop, and I can click right here to complete my items, or I can even delete them. So a lot more advanced stuff. We saw the custom name templates. We talked about how you can create very advanced layouts thanks to the custom name templates. And we talked about HTML expression, how you can do advanced templates without having to create a template, and the single line alert. So lots of things that you can use right away. And I'm pretty sure that you're already thinking about ways to apply this. So let me know if you have any questions, and I would love to address them. Let's see if I see any here in the chat.
Yeah, there's 2 questions. I can read them to you if you'd like, or if you see the chat, you can read
Yeah.
them.
Let's see. I'm looking at the chat. How do the reports look if you export to PDF? Well, that's a good question. I guess it depends on the way you would export to PDF. The built-in functionality, with the built-in PDF functionality from Apex, I don't think you get the PDF the effect that you have because you're using HTML for the layout. So I'll be honest, I didn't try it. I haven't tried it. I haven't used it like that. So that's a very good question. I don't know. My guess is that you don't get the same layout. This is not something you would export to PDF. We have another question. Jorge, if we create our own templates for reports, do we have to be careful with the Apex versions change or universal theme? Yeah. So do we have to be careful with Apex versions, or if the Apex, the universal theme gets upgraded? So your custom template, you can create custom templates on a universal theme that is still registered. What do I mean by registered? Now in the universal theme, you never really want to unregister. And I may have unregistered this one. I did. So this one is unregistered because I was completely messing with this one. But you really want to have a template that is a theme that is not here. We can restore the subscription, right? A universal theme that is subscribed. Why do you want to subscribe? When it's subscribed, when you upgrade versions of Apex, that subscribed theme can receive patches and fixes, right? For the HTML, it will get fixed. So you do want to keep it subscribed. Now, you can have it subscribed and you can create custom templates. Now, those custom templates will not get touched by the upgrade. And if you're using classes that are part of the universal theme, chances are they will still keep on working the same. Now, it is a possible risk. You basically are maintaining it on your own. If if you're doing something like this example where I have the contacts, this is so far away from the universal theme. The only thing I'm using from universal theme is kind of the same font and color scheme, if you will. That will get upgraded, but all the other CSS, I'm responsible for it. So it's not going to break, but it may not look perfectly in tune with the next version of Apex if the look and feel changes too much. In general, I think you're going to be fine because this is a very out of the box standard functionality. It's not really a customization. This is the template I want for a new layout, but it is something to be aware of. Good question. Anybody else? Any follow-ups? While somebody's typing or doing something, I will tweet this out. Rimblas, at Rimblas on Twitter. In GitHub, on the Rimblas, you will be able to download this demo app. This whole app is available to download here from GitHub. Let me open that. Here's the repo. You can watch another presentation that was kind of the precursor to this one, which Hook on Classics. This is the one we're watching. Here's a previous recording of this, the demo we were looking at, and the videos I was talking about. And in here, in the Apex app, here's the app, the demo app we've been using. So you'll be able to look at all that so you can really dig through it and figure it out. And I'll be very happy to answer questions even after this session on Twitter, preferably, or GitHub too. You can open a GitHub issue if there's a problem with the application or you find something interesting here. Go here to issues, create something.
So I don't see any other questions in the chat. So I think, oh, so we got a little response.
Just a follow up, right?
Yep.
It's pretty standard out of the box. So it's to the previous question, right? If it's pretty standard and out of the box, we can mostly be safe, but you should test the template after the upgrade. Exactly. That is the takeaway.
All right. If there's no more questions, then I think we are done for today. I really want to say many thanks to Jorge for spending an hour with us and giving us some more wisdom on some of these things that you're able to do with classic report templates. I know for myself, I learned a few things since I consider myself quite a newbie when it comes to Apex development. But it was really good. So thank you for joining us. And we, like I said, next week, same time of day and same time of the week, Wednesday at noon, we'll have our next presentation from Jeff Smith from Oracle. He is the SQL developer and ORDS product manager. Really fantastic presentations that he gives as well. So I highly recommend if you're using Apex, you really need to understand how ORDS can benefit you, how the synergies between the two can really make your Apex applications come a long way.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I agree.
So hopefully we'll see you then. And also, I know Jorge has previous presentations of this, but we're doing a live stream on YouTube. So I will, I think it was in actually the reminder of the Zoom meeting, the URL for our COUG channel. Let me paste that in the chat real quick, and it'll be available for you to watch at any time there as well. So you got multiple avenues to get your information. So I think that's a good thing.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Jorge.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It was fun to share this again, and hopefully everybody can see opportunities to use them right away.
Yeah, I agree. They should. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Take care, guys.
Hey.
Pleasure.